there is a very purposeful plan by God in the way that the Quran has been put together and ordered.
But the be-all and end-all of it is if we're going to turn to anyone to come to truth, we're going to always turn to the pure truth. We don't want tainted truth. We always want to turn to the pure truth. Al-haq.
A good counter example of the opposite of this, and it may be controversial to some people, but would be the concept where people on Ramadan pull their book down from their high shelf and they speed read through it in the concept that they're going to get a reward for this. But that's literally all they're doing is speed. There's no concept of understanding. They're just told to believe that if you do this, there's a reward.
So this last part I will share with you was something which I was taught to recite before I did my exams. This was meant to be enable me to get good marks. Rabbi yazidni ilman. Keep studying it, keep paying attention to it until you get it, until you obtain the guidance.
Mm-hmm. So you've got what the inspiration of the verse is.
Right.
The knowledge of the verse. Hence the end of it saying, and say, my Lord, increase me in knowledge. Because the whole purpose is you're trying to learn.
Right.
You're trying to expand your knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
Great connection. Yes. Okay. Peace and blessings, everybody. Welcome to another podcast on Unpicking Verses, where we do a detailed study between the three of us of a particular verse or a group of verses. Today, we are actually taking a request from one of our viewers. So I'll describe that in a second. But before we do that, first of all, salam to Brother Ahmed.
Salam, peace.
And salam and peace and blessings to Mike as well.
Peace and blessings to you both.
As always, it's great to be in your company as we head into another verse or two to unpick today. Let's see how we get on. So the verse that we are looking at, as I mentioned, was a request from one of our viewers, which we thought, okay, well let's do one of those today. So I'm just going to share. This is chapter 20, which is Surah Taha, and verse 114, which you can see over here. We thought, actually, before we get into this particular one, we'll probably at least touch on the previous verse, which is 113. So I'm actually, although this is the request was to unpick this verse, I think we're going to take two verses. So we'll take 113 and we'll take 114 as well, because the context forms around the two of these verses. So, Brother Ahmed and Mike, is that good with you?
Just fine.
Yeah, that's fine. I agree with that.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, let's get ready to do another session of unpicking and see where we go. So, as we normally do, if I may request Mike to do a quick reading of these two verses before we get into the unpicking.
And I'll just read through both. And thus we have sent it down, the Qur'an, in Arabic, and we have explained and we have explained in it of the warnings that they may fear, or it may cause for them remembrance. So high, Allah the King, the True, and do not hasten with the Qur'an from before that is completed to you its revelation, and say, my Lord, increase me in knowledge.
Thank you, Mike. So shall I start just to get the unpicking the study going? So from the initial reading and thinking of these two verses, what occurred to me was that this is, or one of the key parts of key subjects of these two verses is the Quran. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been doing podcasts specifically around areas such as, actions required of us when it comes to righteous deeds and ihsan and salat and these kind of things. These two verses are talking about the Qur'an. And of course, there are lessons and there are actions required of us, which will come out of this, I'm sure. But the essence of these two verses is about the Qur'an, because God is talking about the revelations. And he mentions the Qur'an, which, as we've discussed and studied before, is the name of the book when it is studied and understood. That was the first point I think it's worth raising, that we're discussing here the revelations of God.
Yes, I agree. And I did come across something, because you brought it up about the Qur'an. I came across chapter 3, verse 65 and 66. So 3, 65 and 66.
Would you like me to read them?
Please, yes.
365. O people of the book, why do you argue concerning Abraham, while not was revealed the Torah and the Injil except from after him? Then why don't you use your intellect? Here you are, those who argued about what for you of it have some knowledge. Then why do you argue about what not for you of it any knowledge? And Allah knows, but you do not know.
Right, so in that verse it says people of the book, and then it goes on to talk about how they're using that book without any knowledge. So without any knowledge, it's talking about people of the book. But when it's talking about study, it's saying Al-Qur'an. So
Yes.
how you mentioned before about using the word Al-Qur'an here, I think it is implying, with the context of the study of this book as well, also, definitely here.
Yes, fully agree. And I think if we just take it a little bit further from the word Qur'an in Arabic, and we've explained in it of the warnings that they may, and I know the translations here say fear, that they may fear. I've deliberately kept it as yattaqun here in the slide we've got on the screen, because again, as we've studied before, fear doesn't really give the right definition of the word taqwa, or in this case, yattaqun. Because I think when we were studying, for instance, it might have been our first podcast, actually, episode number 1, we were studying chapter number 2, verse 177, and we went through a very descriptive study of that verse in terms of the mental and the physical attributes of an individual that is on the right path. It ends it off with, these are the people who are muttaqeen. And so it wasn't about fear at all, actually. And the way in my mind, I think about what yattaqun or taqwa is talking about when you are consistently following the commandments of God and you're staying within the bounds which have been set by God.
Right. So to just add to that, so for people who are listening, wanting to understand why we came that way, the root word for that word is wa kaf ya. And in the description for that root word is to protect, save, preserve, ward off, guard against evil and calamity, be secure, take as a shield, regard the duty. All of those are the initial descriptions of that word, and none of those fear does not fit there. The concept of fear doesn't fit there. The concept of protecting yourself does, and you protect yourself by doing what? By applying what we're learning from this kitab, this book, and living it in our best way. And by studying and learning that book, it protects us from the falsehoods, the falsities, the things, the lies that could be said against us.
Yes, and also it's saying here that we have explained in it of the warnings that they may yattaqun, right? So what God is saying is that within the Quran, once it's studied, you will understand the warnings which God has described to say, if you're not following the right path, such will be your result. And the reason for those warnings, that they may yattaqun, the reason for those warnings is that is so that people will follow the right path and protect themselves from those results of the warnings of the bad deeds, and strive to stay on that path. So it's not to be in fear. It's not to let's stay in fear and hide somewhere. It's to fear the results of not being on the path.
Yeah. And just to add to the context, the word for warning there is mostly used in the Qur'an as a promise rather than a warning.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, or something that has been promised or
Wa'idi.
guaranteed.
Wa'idi.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so like a guarantee or a promise.
Right. Yes. So warning is perhaps putting a negative connotation on something which perhaps doesn't need a negative connotation.
Exactly. So just to change the bit of context there. So if it's explained in what's been promised, or it's explained in, and then it's getting for us so that we can gain taqwa from it as well, which gives us security, doesn't it? So yeah, I do see how the choice of translation there has been may give a different viewpoint.
Yeah, it's a very good spot. Very good spot, because if we look at the Arabic, it is wa'id, which is it's a promise. It's another example, isn't it? Before we move on, as we've been finding in these unpicking verses studies that we're doing, we did a lot of it last week, where you pick some of these verses, and when you really get into the detail, you find that's an odd translation. So that's a really good spot, actually.
I find it a lot more and more now that we're doing this kind of this work. It really starts to stand out even more so, because as you learn these inconsistencies, you start to see them where they've been used in other places, and it really starts to draw out and cause you to look deeper into it and get past that surface translation to find the truth.
Yes. So I think if we take the context of 113, it appears to be explaining to us that this book has been revealed to us, which is Qur'an. It requires to be studied, and in that study, what we find, or through that study, what we will find is an explanation of wasarafna, an explanation of the promises which have been made to us by our Creator, for those in order for us to understand them, to really understand them, and then strive to achieve taqwa, strive to get on the path and stay on the path that will protect us, such that we are staying within the bounds which God has described, that will keep us protected.
I would also go on to add at the end of that, it says remembrance. I'm not sure that it may cause for them to remind them, would seem to be, more of a more accurate thing. Remembrance, I think, is there, but it's not quite to the concept, I think, that it's intending to say. Because it's got this very serious statement before, and down at the bottom at the end, and so that maybe cause you to remember something. That doesn't quite, it doesn't resonate, the context of it, the verse to me. But to remind or bear in mind or be mindful of what this is teaching you, or the purpose of behind that, would make more, it seems to be more sense and more applicable to the context of the verse.
I see another chance for us to pick apart the Arabic here, because where we've said it may cause them remembrance, there's two root words here that we can pick apart. It says yuhaddith, where the root word is haddatha, and then dhikr. So we've got haddatha, which is to declare, So it declares for them dhikr. I would say dhikr there is, from how I'm receiving it, rather than remembrance, I would say mindfulness.
That's where I was going. Yeah, same thing. Very good.
Yeah, so cause them, again, is also, I think, perhaps not the right translation here, isn't it? Because, yeah, you're right. It's yuhdithu.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
So that it might give them taqwa, or if not taqwa, so it's two different things as well there, where it's saying it's been sent down in Arabic, explained, so they might receive from it taqwa, or that they might gain mindfulness.
And both of those things are impossible if you are merely reciting. I think that's the other point here, isn't it? This is why the word Qur'an is used, because you cannot have the mindfulness, nor can you expect to achieve taqwa by merely reciting a scripture.
And in a language you may not know. I mean, granted, this was sent down for those who do speak Arabic. That's fine, but the context, the transcending part of that is people who don't know Arabic. And that's why it's important to not just recite Arabic, but to understand what it is you're reciting. Learn what the translation is, and understand what it is you're saying in Arabic, so that you have some form of meaning to it, other than just saying words.
Yeah, so it's saying here it's explained in the Arabic as well also. That's very prominent to me. And I think when it talks about the Qur'an, if we go from a context of study, and it's explained in the Arabic, so I think when we're breaking down these words like this here, it's kind of similar to, I think, things that we might be seeking from this book, like when we're reading and we're trying to break things down to gain a better understanding. It's giving us this reassurance that, God has guided us. So where it says the promise, where if we change from the warnings to the promise, that gives us the security, that gives us the taqwa. We feel secure when we're reading this book and we're seeing the eloquence of it and how amazing it is when we study it and unpick it. It's giving us more reassurance.
Peace of mind. Understanding.
Yeah. Because we feel like we're being given what's promised, which is a message from our Lord. And also, at times, it gives us dhikr, which is mindfulness. So we can come across some verses where it hits us and it's like makes us think and ponder. So I think this is saying that this is the purpose of why it's been sent down like this, so that it can be studied in order to attain taqwa and dhikr.
Yeah, and I was thinking about whether when it says that this is Quran and Arabian, is God saying that it is in Arabic because after it says and we have explained in it of the promises, right, that they may yattaqun, is it being the fact that it is in Arabic, does that property, how important is that property, the fact that it's in Arabic, to this goal which is being described here, which is that you achieve taqwa or you achieve mindfulness?
I don't have the verses on hand, but there is an explanation as to why it was brought to them in the language they can understand, so they wouldn't reject it. They wouldn't look at it as something foreign or outside of their realm. Had it been brought in any other language, it would have been rejected by them right away. They would have said, this is a falsehood, you're making it up, whatever it may be. So the purpose initially was to bring it to a people in a language they understood, so that it'd be easy for them to.
Yeah, I think that's in 16103. 16103.
And certainly we know that they say, only teaches him a human being. The tongue of the one they referred to him is foreign, while this is a language Arabic clear.
It's almost saying you have no excuse.
Well, I mean, people speak different languages around the world, but we still have access to Arabic now as a language, whereas there doesn't seem to be intact any other scripture that's intact in its original language.
This is the one that God said he would protect from corruption. Now, the Arabic's not corrupted. We're clearly getting the message from it as we study it and break it down. The translations are almost certainly always corrupted, appears to be.
Or at least bias.
Right, or bias.
I mean,
right.
even I would put my hands up and say that my interpretations are biased to my own limited understanding.
Sure.
So, if someone wants to get to know what the Qur'an is saying, I think it's more important for them to study it and for them to take on.
Can't say that enough. No matter what we say, don't take what we say at face value. Always, as God instructs you to, in the book, take it to the book and confirm for yourself. That's the only way you're truly going to be directly being guided between you and God, or getting guidance between you and God, is by going directly to the words of God and seeking that knowledge from Him. We can help show you the differences and the things that we find, but ultimately every individual is going to be responsible for their own understanding.
Well, even through our own study, the three of us bring different angles from our experiences and our knowledge and our understanding.
Right.
And one of the reasons why what we do is so exciting for me, for example, is that I get to share and hear from you. But, exactly as you said, Allah says that each of us have to undertake our own deep study of the Quran, number one. And secondly, Allah instructs us not to blindly follow anyone or anything, including the verses of the Quran. They have to be understood. People have to satisfy themselves intellectually that what they are studying, it makes sense for them in their environment, in their time, and then apply it in their lives. So yeah, I agree. I think it's really important people understand that even what we're doing here, it is potentially slightly less biased than if there was one individual study being broadcast, because there are three of us that are trying to form a study of this, but it is still biased by three individuals out of the billions that exist on this earth.
I think the key is to, as the purpose of doing this, right, is to get deeper in and find the actual understandings that are meant for us to understand, by trying to get around the biases that have already been put there. Now, each one of us, our biases are only limited by our experience and our understanding. It doesn't mean that we're coming at it with a bias ideology. We're not supposed to do that, right? What's the one thing we're supposed to do before we dive into something like this is to make sure we're not intoxicated by feelings, emotion, desires, all of those things that can affect how we look and read these. And I think that's why it's important that the three of us are doing this, because we also help each other maintain that check and balance amongst ourselves. We might hear something that doesn't sound right from one of the others, and if we can see that and we can openly discuss it, we may find that may be correct or incorrect. But we're not here to prove that we're right or wrong. And I think that's a big difference between how a lot of people do this. We're simply here just to go through it, each with our own knowledge and background to discuss it, talk about it as we learn it. But we're not here to prove anybody right or wrong, because everybody has to they're at their own level. So they've got to do their process as well.
Thank you. Well said, Mike.
I think We might be ready for the next verse now.
We are. I agree. So this is the next verse. Now, what I thought might be useful as we unpick this is I've split this into 3 different parts. So there's the blue, the red, and the black, just to help us with our study here. And all of them contain some very important messages. But I think once we've done them, when we've kind of unpicked them separately, we can bring them back together again. So hopefully that works for both of you as well, to do it this way, just to help us as we go through this.
Yeah, that looks very useful, actually, split into sections like that.
Yeah. Now, the first word which took my attention was, in fact, this very first word, Fata'aala. So Allah is describing an attribute of God. This very first word. It's talking about the superior nature of God, superior over everything, the exalted nature. And I found a couple of, or 2 or 3 verses which help us to understand this attribute, if I may just go through those. The first one is chapter 30, verse 40.
Allah, the one who created you, then he provided for you, then he will cause you to die, then he will give you life. Is there any of your partners who does of that anything? Glory be to him, and exalted is he above what they associate.
Yeah, so here, the last part of this is Subhanahu wa ta'ala amma yushrikun. So what you have described through that verse, the translation of that verse, is ending with this attribute of God, which is Allah. So he's giving life, he's causing death, and then life again. And he's saying, is there anyone or anything else that can do that? Right?
Okay.
So, I mean, only the all-powerful can do that. That's the kind of the status of Allah, that word Allah. And if I may just point to another one, and there are many verses describing this word, by the way, but I'll just do just 2 more, just so we can get a full sense of this. 72, so chapter 72, verse 3.
72 verse 3.
Yes, please.
That he exalted is the majesty of our Lord, not he has taken a wife and not a son.
There we go. So this is another attribute or another description of the word Allah here, that he's not begotten, nor does he beget, right? So he's sufficient on his own. So that, again, imagine how supreme this being is, described by the word Allah. And just one more I would just point to, which is chapter 23, verse 92. So as you can see, I did a little bit of homework.
23 verse 92.
Yes, please.
Knower of the unseen and the witnessed, exalted is he above what they associate.
There we go. So he has knowledge of all the unseen. Again, who else or what else can have knowledge of the unseen? So these are, again, some descriptions, and there are many others in the Quran, some descriptions or explanations of what it means when God describes himself as Allah. So this verse is starting with an attribute of God, Fata'aala.
I think that that comes off what we were discussing from the last verse, when we were saying, okay, we've got a biased opinion to our own biases. It's saying here, so high is God. He is the owner of truth. So when we're reading these verses, we might be able to help and study together. And I always find studying with other people, or certain people especially, can help develop our understanding of these verses. But the be-all and end-all of it is, if we're going to turn to anyone to come to truth, we're going to always turn to the pure truth. We don't want tainted truth. We always want to turn to the pure truth. Al-haq. it says here. And it says here that Allah, He is the king or the master of al-haq. So we always should be seeking to turn to Allah, and also what is the purpose of this message from Allah, and always turning to Allah for our understandings. Despite what we discuss here, when we're pondering, we always wanting to be turning to Allah, not trying to impress each other or impress an audience, even before and afterhand.
Yes, and this word al-haq is al-haq, the
correct.
The truth. So it's unique. So I think one of the things this tells us also is that this truth, which is unique, it is only unique if it is eternal. There is one truth, firstly, one truth. And because we know that the Qur'an is eternal, this one truth is transcending time. And this truth will always be the truth, which is why I said the word eternal. Now, in our lives, things change, right? So, our values change and laws change. And, one day something might be true in terms of what's best for someone or something. And another day, the truth might change. Something else might be best for someone or something or a community. But what God is saying here by using the word al-haq is that He's the master of this one unique, eternal truth that will never change.
Yes, exactly. So even our opinions of these verses, that when we read and come to study, they change, and we develop different understandings through the layers that we unpick. But the truth is with Allah. So likely when you're saying the truth doesn't change, like the verses don't change. But as we read and we study and we unpick and we discover words and root words and such, we're unpicking stuff that's already there, and then our mind begins to recognize the truth. And I think when we're turning to try and recognize the truth, we should be seeking it from Allah, because it says al-Malik as well, al-Malik al-Haq.
Yes, it's again the essence of turning to Him to find the truth, right? Because He is the Malik-ul-haq. We have to turn to Him. We can't go to, so-and-so, Professor so-and-so, Imam so-and-so, Mufti so-and-so, and get a final deliberation and say, you tell us about the truth, and we will just, we will turn to you. Allah, as we described, He's above everything else, is the master and the owner of that truth, and therefore we must turn to Him when we are studying the Quran. We must have in our mind that we are seeking guidance with a pure heart, pure mind from Him, from the Malik-ul-haq.
Mm-hmm. And as we were saying before, when we're reading these verses, I might say something different to you, and it might ring true to me. And I'm accountable for my level of understanding.
Mm.
But you might read something and you're on a different level of understanding, on a different path and journey through your life. You might get a different understanding.
Mm.
And one of us might need to learn a lesson on our journeys. One of us might be wrong, one of us might be right, we might both be wrong. But if you accept your level of understanding and you go ahead on your journey and continue your study, I think if you take accountability for your own understanding, I think it's more feasible than to take on somebody else's understanding to say that, because they understand it, they're right, and because of, some extraordinary reason.
Yes, there's so much emphasis here, isn't there? I know we've repeated this over the course of this session a few times about the importance of self-study and really understanding it ourselves and connecting with God ourselves to achieve that truth. let's move to the next section.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So as Mike, I think you're reading it. I think you said, and not hasten with the Quran before it is completed to its revelation.
Now, do we want to use the reading as the Quran is translated to, instead of just using the word Quran as a way to make sure we're, fully translating it? I just say that because that can often people will look at the word Quran and just think the book and not recognize that it has a definition to it. Right.
So I think where you're going with this is, if we make it very clear, this is about the studying and understanding of the Quran.
Correct. Of the Kitab.
Of the Kitab. Yes. Yeah.
You see what I mean?
No, I get it. Totally get it.
We do it unintentionally, but it does change.
Yes. I agree. Now, this phrase at the beginning of this part of the verse, wala ta'ajal. So wala and not ta'ajal. So the way I understand this word is, it's when you're rushing, when you're not taking the time to stop and think, when you have this the instinct of just getting through something quickly. Being impatient. I think that's another way I would understand this word as well.
Being hasty or hastily.
Yeah. And I came across a couple of verses which I think will be relevant to this part of the verse, which contains the same phraseology here, particularly using the word ta'jal as well. If I may go through those. So if Mike is ready.
Yeah, tell me the verse, though.
Thank you. So the first one, actually these are two verses. The first one, chapter 75, verses 16 and 17.
All right. Not move with it your tongue to hasten with it. Indeed, upon us is its collection and its recitation.
So in this one, and we can just take sort of the key messages very quickly, and we could do a whole study in its own right on this one. What I took from that is, again, we're using the word here, ajal. So he says, La tuharrik bihi lisanaka li ta'jala bihi. Okay, so do not use haste. And then in 17 he's saying, for behold, it is for us to, the word here is jam'ahu wa qur'anahu. So the ordering of it, the way it has been put together, the way it has been compiled has been decided by God. So what I've taken from it is that there is a very purposeful plan by God,
okay,
in the way that the Quran has been put together and ordered. And God is saying, don't rush. Take your time, because there is a reason why it has been done this way. And then if I may just then go to the other reference I was going to give, which is...
sorry, before you do, can I just interject there?
Oh, yes, please.
Because in the verses at 17 that you just used, the last word is Qur'anahu. So upon us is
17.
Yes.
Yeah, upon us is Qur'anahu. So when we were just saying that turning to Allah for studying, it's using the qira'ah there, the word Qur'an, for saying that is for Allah to do that for us. So when we're going to study and learn and understand, that is up to Allah.
That's pretty
the
deep.
True reading. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The understanding He intends for.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The true understanding. I agree.
Yeah. So you can go ahead to the next verse.
Okay.
There, I just wanted to add that.
No, thank you. That's great. Thank you. So chapter 25, verse 32.
And said those who disbelieve, why not was revealed to him the Quran all at once? Thus, that we may strengthen thereby your heart, and we have recited it with distinct recitation.
Yes. So Now, remember one of the things I was saying I've taken away from the previous verses was that there is a purposeful plan behind the way God has ordered the Quran, and not to rush. One of those, I think, what this verse gives us is one of those purposes where God says that it is in this way so that it may enter our hearts. Now, we may or may not understand this fully, and certainly I will need to do more pondering of this as to how this happens, but its ordering and the way it has been compiled is more conducive to entering our hearts than if it were not compiled in this way. So we will take it to heart, understand it, accept it, and be inclined to follow it more because of the way it has been put together and the way it encourages us therefore to study it. And perhaps it will, if all the topics, for example, in one chapter, and each topic has a chapter, perhaps that will not happen.
Well, I would say that what we're doing right now is exactly what he's asking us to do.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say that this is talking about Al-Qur'an, not the book.
Al-Qur'an.
Right,
Yes,
the reading. So that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
The process of what we're literally doing right now and all these different definitions is along the lines, I think, of what he's trying to convey to us. That if you take your time, read it aloud or in a medium voice, listen to yourself, study it. Don't just read it like you're reading the newspaper just to get through things and find the things you're interested in, but literally take your time and read everything that's there and study every word that's there and make sure you've got a good understanding so you can get the right message from him. I think what our process is just another example of what these verses are designed. Not the complete picture, but as an example. We sit here and take our time. We go through it. We're looking at each Arabic word. We're studying the words that are given to us to understand them better than what we did before. And as we do, we gain a much more extensive knowledge and understanding, a much more inclusive and comprehensive conclusion to each of these verses that seem to follow into exactly what God's teaching us throughout the rest of the book. As an example.
Yeah, and I was going to add to that. So when we're talking about the Quran, we're not just doing one reading of it and then we're coming out with our final decision. We have to continue to keep reading and studying. So it's not just we're not just being able to understand it just on one reading. I think on that verse it's saying like, why didn't we just receive it in one go?
Right.
I think that's what it's saying there. And it's saying that when we're studying and trying to be sure of it and we're questioning these words and saying like, no, because I think I'm also scrutinizing it to see if there's any inconsistencies at the same time. And then when I actually find out what it's actually saying, it's even more convincing then because I've had to study it and put in the effort and to see what it actually is saying. So I think that's what's conveying here in this verse. And if we go back to the verses that we're studying and how it says that it brings us taqwa, I think this is a description here possibly of how the taqwa is brought to us because we're having to study it and question it and find the different layers of meaning in order for it to become even more convincing to us. Because as well, I think when it talks about dhikr as well in the next where it says either taqwa or dhikr is, it's like it's a reminder because sometimes we forget, we read stuff and we forget. So we need a reminder to reassure us again.
A good counter example of the opposite of this and it may be controversial to some people, but would be the concept where people on Ramadan pull their book down from their high shelf and they speed read through it in the concept that they're going to get a reward for this. But that's literally all they're doing is speed. There's no concept of understanding. They're just told to believe that if you do this, there's a reward. And I think that would be a good example of what he's saying not to do.
Absolutely right. And I mean, I used to do the same thing. And, in my mind, and, when I first learned how to recite the Quran, my focus was on speed, right? Which is the opposite of what God is commanding here. Do not hasten with the Quran. And the same thing happens when in Ramadan, it's very much related to what you're saying, Mike, as well. Yeah. Is the Tarawih prayers that people go to, where they attend mosques in the evenings, and the Imam is reciting the Quran over the course of the evening. It's a speed reading event, essentially, which is going against this particular command. And I think with Ahmed, as you were saying, that we become more convinced if we're not just reading in one go, we're actually going back and reminding ourselves and getting the reminders. With the verse that we just studied, 25:32, I think only then will it really seep into our hearts, that message. When we've become convinced that this is the truth, I think that's what God is trying to make happen with us individually, to get into our hearts. And for it to drive our activities and our feelings and our desires. And
I mean, the other part of that is the concept it's saying here in 25:32 is that the purpose behind not revealing it all at once along the lines of what you're saying is because there is so much to learn from and to gain from that if you were to reveal it all at once, there's no way for them to get all of that at once, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of habits, there's a lot of things they're doing in their lives, there's a lot of idolization and all that kind of stuff. They've got to work through each of these issues one at a time to the point where they recognize the difference between what God is teaching us in the book versus the way they're living their life. And it's a slow process. As you reach individuals and they start to recognize it, then you get a larger and larger group of people over time that start to see the truth. Then it becomes even easier as you go for them to comprehend. It's like learning how to write or how to read. First, you've got to learn what the letters are and the shape, to recognize the letters. Then you've got to understand how the letters put together mean something and how they create those words. You can't do that all at once. It takes time. There's a process to it. That's what it's saying in this verse. There's a specific process and a specific reason for doing it this way so that you're able to comprehend it as you go. And it goes back to that. It's not an all-at-once thing where you can read it, be done, and say, okay, I'm a Muslim, I know what I have to do. This is a lifelong learning process.
The other thing which I think this part of the verse is telling us, where it says, before it says, min qabli an yuqda ilayka wahyuhu, before before the revelation is completed. And I think this is pointing to the notion that you have to look into different parts of the Quran to make a picture, form this puzzle, if you like. Yeah, so you have to, it encourages you to look into different parts of the Quran to answer your questions. And from experience, I can understand why that is the case. And a good example or good way of explaining that is exactly what we have been doing as part of these studies. We are looking into different parts of the Quran to make sense of the verses and the words that we are unpicking. And the reason why that is a sensible way of doing it, as we found, is that all of these concepts are interlinked. So many concepts are interlinked. And when you understand the interlinking of different concepts and words and phraseologies which God uses, all with purpose, it gives you a much deeper, richer, wider lens to be able to answer your questions and form true guidance for you.
Fantastic. I agree with that.
I did want to mention something about this section that was just mentioned here, where the last word is wahyahu. And you said, I have a translation saying that it's revelation, whereas I would say that if we look into, there's a verse I can bring that differentiates revelation from this word.
This is going to be interesting.
3, is it 6:91 to 93?
And did not they appraise Allah with true his appraisal, when they said, not revealed Allah on a human being of anything? Say, who revealed the book which brought it to Musa as a light and a guidance for the people? You make it unto parchments, you disclose some of it, and you conceal much of it, and you were taught what not knew you and not your forefathers. Say, Allah revealed it, then leave them in their discourse plain. And this is a book. We have revealed it, blessed, confirming which from between his hands, so that you may warn the mother of the cities and who are around it, and those who believe in the hereafter, they believe in it. And they, over their prayers, or over their salah, are guarding. And who is more unjust than one who invents about Allah a lie, or said, it has been inspired to me, while not it was inspired to him anything, and one who said, I will reveal like what has revealed Allah. And if you could see what the wrongdoers are in agonies, the death, while the angels are stretching out their hands, saying, discharge your souls. Today you will be recompensed. Punishment humiliating, because you used to say against Allah other than the truth, and you were towards his verses being arrogant.
This has got a lot of uses of the word. So in 91, there's a section at the start where it says, Anzal al-Kitab. Okay, so it's brought down the book. So where it's talking about the book, where it's talking about revelation in terms of the book being revealed, the word Anzala is used here. Okay, that's in 91. So if we go to 93, who's lied about Allah and said, Uhiya ilayya. So Uhiya ilayya, I think there's more to do with inspired.
Yeah, it says in my translation it does say inspired.
Inspired to me, because later on in this verse it says that they will claim to do tanzil themselves. It says ma anzala Allahu what qala. Right, so later on it says they will do tanzil, the same as what Allah has done. And we noticed in 91 it's saying that they did tanzil of the book. Yeah?
Yep.
So if we look at 93, it says Uhiya, which is inspired, and then it's got tanzil later on, which is revealed.
I've got Anzala.
Yeah, Anzala. But the same word is used for bringing down the book. So as far as revelation goes, what I'm trying to say is that it's not about revelation, it's about inspiration. So when we're looking at the verse that we're studying here, we're not trying to get to the revelation. It's already been revealed. The book is already there. Like we were talking about before, the truth is already there. It doesn't change. What we want is inspiration from what the verses is saying. We're not trying to study it to get revelation.
Right. Yeah. So,
So,
so I think if I take that, then what this is saying is that Allah is saying that we must keep coming back to the Quran, keep paying attention, keep studying it, keep paying attention to it until until you get it, until you obtain the guidance.
so you've got what the inspiration of the verse is.
Right.
The knowledge of the verse.
Something,
Hence the end of it saying, and say, my Lord, increase me in knowledge. Because the whole purpose is you're trying to learn. You're
right.
trying to expand your knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, exactly.
Great connection. Yes. Yeah. Shall we move on to that last part?
Sure.
Ahmed, is that okay? Is there anything else on that?
Yeah, I think we just did. Yeah, that's perfect.
Perfect. So this last part I will share with you was something which I was taught to recite before I did my exams. This was meant to enable me to get good marks. Rabbi yazidni ilman, I used to recite before I gave any exams. But as part of the ritualistic upbringing which I had. So waqur Rabbi zidni ilman, and say, my Lord, increase me knowledge. Now, just one thing which I want to share with you in terms of the way I understand when Allah says the word qul, as to what I take from it, and would be interested in your thoughts on this. When I see qul in the Quran, the translation is say, but I don't think or feel that it is necessarily confining a physical uttering of a phrase or words. Just say it. When Allah used the word qul in the Quran, for me it makes sense to mean, what's the best word to use? Not say. Convey, yes. Convey,
Yeah,
think, convey, transpose. These types of things. Those words, it's hard to actually find one word to describe it, but say is probably the lowest kind of denominator, if you like. It's more than that.
Yeah, because we know that words can be shallow. Yeah, words can be a bit shallow.
Yeah.
We keep on bringing this point up, is that these concepts require action or follow through.
Yes, exactly. That's where my head is going. That it's not just a matter of say, Rabbi zidni ilman.
Right. I mean, as for the root definition, it helps out with that too. Kaf, wa, lam. To say, speak, to call, to be named, word, speech, utterance, a thing said, greeting, discourse, one who says or speaks. And then it says to inspire, transmit, relate, answer, think, profess, emit an opinion on, indicate a state or condition or circumstance.
Right.
So the word you're looking for really wants to incorporate most of all of that.
Yes.
So say it doesn't do it justice. I agree with you. It would be difficult to find a word that is more encompassing. I think it really is going to be dependent on the verse and the context of the verse, as far as picking the right ones of those that would match it better than just to say or say.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's fine for something to say, but I don't think it just to say Rabbi zidni ilman is the solution.
Yes.
I think saying it doesn't solve what it's saying here.
Right. It gives the false connotation or narrative, like Brother Munib had said. This is what I was told to say under these conditions. When I'm going to go take a test or something, as if that's all you've got to say to gain that, to get that. And it's not. That's not how that works. You can't just say something and then you're going to get a result from it that you're looking for. And that's a lot of people are led to believe that very scenario. I agree with you 100%. They see something in here where it says say, and it's the messenger of the prophet being instructed to give an instruction about something. A lot of people are led to believe if they just say that, they're going to benefit from it.
Yes. It's
So
almost
yeah.
sorry, please. Yeah.
I was just going to say it's important, so important to understand the context and why it's being presented that way.
Mm.
What was the situation of the messenger at the time or the prophet at the time and the people being spoken to? Why is the prophet or messenger being told to say this to this group of people? What was the context for that? And you'll find that there's a lesson, not just a quote. He's telling them something, a truth that's different than what they understand currently. So this is why he's being told to say it to them, because they're in the wrong way. They're doing the wrong thing. So here's the answer, the guidance that he is instructed to give them that leads them directly back to the book, where it's not him, but it's the book, it's the reading that he's giving them that they now need to take and go back to and reflect on and understand why. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Completely agree with you that that's not the way it should be.
Yes, and I think in the context of this verse, what I took away from it was that when Allah's saying "Qul," actually He's saying to us, perhaps have the mindset. So when you are turning towards the Quran and you're studying it and you're looking to derive the truth from it, the mindset that you should have is that you're turning to your Rabb, your Lord, to increase your knowledge, to give you that truth, to be able to identify that truth and to understand it. So for me, that would make more, it makes more sense to translate it in that way. So rather than say internally, or, is to have that mindset when you're coming to the Quran, that this is what I'm looking to do by studying the Quran.
Well, and going back to the concept of transcendence of the reading, right, of the kitab. The whole point is it's for every individual, not just the situation that was at hand at that time with the prophet or messenger. This is for every individual after that, including the prophet and the messenger. So he has to do this for himself as well, correct? So it's not just an instruction for another people. It's for every individual. And like you're saying, this is explaining not only to the people, but to the prophet. So for him, he's also seeking to expand and increase his knowledge and understanding as well. So I'm with you on this as well. The concept is for self as well as for others in the situation that this presents.
What I haven't checked, didn't have the time to cross-check, is whether this phrase وَقُلْ رَبِّي زِدْنِي عِلْمًا is used in any other parts of the Quran, whether there's a wider description that may have been given. But certainly in the context of this verse, as we've discussed, it seems to me that it's about the intention that you should have when you are studying the Quran. It's about the motivation you should have. It's about the way you should set your mindset when studying the Quran, which is to increase the knowledge and to obtain the truth.
Yes. Now, I can give an example here as to why we would proceed with Rabbi Zidni Ilman. Now, I think when we decided on this verse for this episode, we were considering between this and another verse that got suggested as well. But as we were discussing, I mentioned, I think maybe one of you guys also mentioned that it's probably best for us to hold off on that one until maybe we've done a bit more study behind it. And I'm convinced with the book Qur'an, but I've not figured it all out. There are still verses, and I go through it, and I'm like, there's still a lot more to unpick, and I can't get the best understanding of certain verses until I have done further studies. It's verses like this that put me off just jumping in and diving into topics that I haven't really got enough to share in order to be able to help maybe your understanding, even with yourselves, Munib and Mike. If we were to go over some verses, I might not be able to break it down for you to help your understanding. So why would I then bring that to something where we're going to share it on a video? You know, the words here, I've got relative understanding of the concepts, and I'm confident to share my thoughts on these, even though they might not be perfect. I have done my research today to see what we're studying. So even after we've done this verse, I think usually we do say, like, we'll learn more afterwards, and we can go into it again and learn more again. So even our approach with it is that we know that sometimes we need to learn more, or even after we've finished studying a verse and we've done a good job of it, we know that we can go at it again, and there's still more to take out from that.
Yes. I agree with you. Absolutely. I mean, we come to these verses with some knowledge, right? We have a general, I would say, a decent understanding within our own understandings that we're confident with. But then, you know, we come in and we go to a verse, you know, we'll just pick a verse or somebody suggests one. I come to this open-minded. I try not to study before doing this. Because I want to come at this as open-minded and unbiased as possible. Because as I do that, I gain, I think, a good understanding as we discuss it and go through it as it instructs us to. We're not rushing through this. We're taking our time. We're seeking our guidance from God. We're discussing it together based on our understandings and what we learn from it. But ultimately, when we're done with this, I'm going to go back and study it again. And I'm going to put more effort into it and learn even more from it if there's more to be learned. As, you know, I'm positive there is. I have no doubt. So, as we tell everybody, don't, again, and I can't reiterate this enough, don't take everything we say as 100%. Because you need to do your own research as well. We're doing ours. It doesn't make us perfect, and it doesn't make us qualified to say what we say is 100% right. So don't be afraid to, though. I think is the thing here is don't be afraid to explore, and don't be afraid to look into it, and don't be scared to change your understanding if you've learned a better truth than what you originally knew. Because I think that's the intent from God, is that's where our increase in knowledge comes from. We had a truth that we thought we knew and understood, and as we go through this, like our last session and the session before that, have completely changed some things that I understood and knew. I mean, and 100% more truthful than what I understood or knew before that. So, you know, we take it. If we find a truth better than what we have, we apply it until we find another truth better than what we have. I just think it's important that we don't be afraid to do this. Otherwise, we wouldn't get anywhere.
Exactly right. And I think that's what this last part is saying, isn't it? That God is saying, increase your knowledge, right? You know, have that motivation, find the truth. And that truth is with God. He's the, you know, he's Allah, as the first word in this verse says, and he's the Malik-ul-haq. So come and find the truth. I think that last part is an encouragement, isn't it, as well, to say, come and find the truth. And ask your Lord, turn to your Lord who has revealed this. Qur'an, once it is studied. Come and find it.
Yes. I like how you brought it back to the beginning there, because I was just about to bring that in. But I wanted to also, rather, when it says, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, just before it, it's talking about receiving inspiration. So, for example, if we were to read a verse and get some inspiration from it and think, okay, I feel that my understanding of this is guiding me, and we could come out and we feel that it's fixed and we're not going to want to change our understanding. We've not done what it's saying in the end of this verse. We're not seeking more knowledge.
Right.
And we've not recognized the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if God is the master of the truth and we're receiving some inspiration, we should always want to keep that flow going to be able to seek knowledge and to receive inspiration. But I think we mentioned last time about when there's an abundance of things and we're holding on to too much, we can't receive anything more after that. I think when we're receiving inspiration, it's helping us to learn more things. I don't know if I can say it's like it maybe breaks some barriers, some mental barriers, and changes things for us when we're learning.
That goes right into what God teaches us in the book, right? We create the barriers based on our actions and what we choose to believe and not believe. Those barriers are our own devising that God will continue to let us keep and have until we decide to go beyond that barrier.
Yeah. So if we then decide to hold on to something that we've received, we're then putting up another barrier.
Right, right. If we're
to
not
receiving.
Yes. It goes back to the heart, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The open heart. If we say, oh, that's enough now, we know it all, you have a barrier on your heart, and you're not going to absorb any increase in knowledge.
And you will end up rushing your way through the book and not doing the proper Qur'an of it. And
right.
You won't really receive any inspiration. Like we were saying before, when people are doing this speed reading, and you ask them, oh, what do you think of this chapter? And they're like, no, I just read through it to get through it as fast as possible. I didn't study the chapter or the verse.
The intoxication was the reward that they were told they would receive. They were intoxicated by the desire for a reward for themselves, which means they're not doing it for God, right? They're doing it for themselves. They put their blinders up and they're not willing to see past that. They're not getting anything from it.
It's so interesting that you said reward there, because there is a reward at the end of this verse, and the reward is knowledge.
Right. But the knowledge is what God gives you. Yeah.
That's I really, really love that. So you've connected. That's a new thing you've unearthed there, which I hadn't quite seen from this verse. That there is a reward, which is knowledge. And so this is not just for the sake of it. This is knowledge. We're not reading with attention. We're not studying. We're not coming back to it, just for the sake of it. There is a reward there, which is knowledge. Knowledge being one of God's bounties, as we've studied before. And again, another good example of what you forego if you are speed reading. You forego that reward.
You forego the reward of knowledge and understanding. You're going to stay in the same cycle that you're in. You're not going to go beyond it. And that's what we see in today's society. In today's, what would be the best mainstream practicing, is all they do is the same thing every day. They don't go beyond it. They don't learn anything new. They just keep repeating the same cycle and rinse, repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. They're stuck in this little cycle of doing these practices that they were told would give them a reward, and they're receiving nothing from it.
I think we've done quite a lot of unpicking here anyway.
Yeah.
Again, this is quite a short it's a short verse, but we've broken it down by word and taken so much knowledge from it, which is what this. I mean, it's interesting that the one I said it at the beginning. The verse that we are unpicking here today is, and we've done this at so many points today in our podcast, that we've referenced our own study as we're doing right now to this verse, because this verse is very much about the study of the Quran. And now I can say it because, you know, it's a new angle which is in my mind now, which is, and the reward you get by studying it that way, the reward through the increase in the knowledge you have of the truth from our master. So those are some of the sort of key messages which I take away from today's study, that, you know, it's encouraging me to continue,
Right.
And to continue to seek out that truth with that mindset of increasing the knowledge which God has bestowed upon me. I think one thing I'd also just say, I suppose, as we begin to wrap up, is I hope the kind person who requested that we do an unpicking of this verse found some value in our unpicking, our study of it. You know, it was a very genuine study, as hopefully people will see, devoid of huge biases or baggage. And I'd also say to other viewers, if you would like us to unpick any of the verses that you've been studying, then please do share those verses. We'll have a go at unpicking, but also please share your own studies, your own thinking around these verses that we're unpicking, because we've been getting a lot of comments on the YouTube channel of what other people are thinking about the verses that we're studying, and they are enormously valuable to us. Mm-hmm. So this is a sharing platform.
Yeah, please, if you have a verse that you're curious about, give us your understanding with it. We're not here to judge you. We're here to do exactly what you see us doing, and the reason why you're asking us. Can you pick it apart, see if there's something different that we can understand from it than you already have? But if we have an idea of your understanding, it helps us to better explore it. Mm-hmm. And you might have some concept that maybe we didn't recognize, and it could be even more understanding than what we find out. You might have a better truth.
Yeah, there's so many layers of depth with this. It's always nice to hear different opinions and ideas.
You know what's very interesting? So these studies that we do, I put them on our podcast platforms like Spotify and so forth. And one of the things which I'm quite interested in doing is listening to others' Qur'an study podcasts, so I can, you know, learn more and get some more angles. And it's interesting that when you search Qur'an study, right, on podcasts or even on YouTube, what you get back are recitations. And what that says to me is that it feels to me that not a lot of people, therefore, have really either not read this verse or certainly not paid attention to it. So even Qur'an study is seen by many to be a recitation of the book.
I would say, unfortunately, that is because that is the teaching from the mainstream. That is right. The ideology and the understanding that they're led to understand and believe. That's what they're taught to believe and understand as their way of gaining some sort of reward. Unfortunately, it's sad. Again, we've talked about that many times. That how disturbing it seems to be that the mainstream of people coming into this deen are really have no knowledge other than what they've been taught, and they don't even go to the book in the first place. They're taught to stay away from it, which is such a huge discredit, and lack of a better way to put it, it's deceitful, because the book teaches you completely opposite. Even by just the few sessions we've had, we can clearly see, and these verses too, that we're truly supposed to be reading this book and learning from it and gaining our knowledge from it through God.
Yeah.
It's a hard pill to swallow if you're a part of that group. But at the same time, at some point, that's our goal, is to plant the seed of curiosity, for lack of a better way to put it, We want to plant a seed of curiosity to get you to take that chance, to go take that leap, to go read the book and see for yourself. We're laying it out for you. In our sessions, we're putting the verses up. We're showing you the truths are there. It's not our writing. It's not our words. These are God's words.
And one thing that I find as well on that note is that I find with trying to please a group is that you'll always find other groups that argue with what they've got to say.
Sure.
And a lot of the times what they're arguing about is what such and such another person said, or what their sheikh or their religious leader said, or someone in history who had a reputation, and they say, we've got a document that says that such and such a person said this, or even the Prophet said such and such a thing attributed to him. They're arguing about something that's either in the book or not in the book. And I think there's a few verses here that I found that might be able to help us understand. It describes the situation. It's chapter 3 from verse 65 to 68.
Chapter 3, 65 to 68?
Yeah, give me a second. Let me just catch up. 365 to 68.
I've gotten good at this.
Yeah.
When you're ready, I'll read them all. 365. O people of the book, why do you argue concerning Abraham, while not was revealed the Torah and the Injil except from after him? Then why don't you use your intellect? Here you are, those who argued about what for you of it have some knowledge. Then why do you argue about what not for you of it any knowledge? And Allah knows while you do not know. Not was Abraham a Jew, and not was a Christian, but he was a true Muslim, and not he was from the polytheists. Indeed, the best to claim relationship of people with Abraham are those who follow him and this the prophet, and those who believe, and Allah is a guardian of the believers.
All right.
That was a tough one to read, sorry.
Oh, sorry. But if we go from verse 65, and it's talking about, they're arguing about the book, Al-Kitab. And in 66, first they're disputing about what they have little knowledge of, and they argue about what they have no knowledge of.
Right. Not he was a Jew, not he was a Christian, he was a true Muslim. And then he was also says, and not he was from the polytheists.
Yeah.
So this is an important division between Jews, Christians, Muslims, and polytheists. He's not saying the Jews and Christians are polytheists. I think that's important to point out because a lot of people tend to associate one with the other in the way they're taught. They're always taught to believe that anything outside of a Muslim is a polytheist. And that's a very incorrect and very deceitful thing to teach people. Because there's plenty of other verses that do define and explain that the Jews have their book, the Christians have their book. They'll be judged by what they believe in their books and their messages. It doesn't say they're polytheists. It says they'll be judged by their own because they choose to follow those books and to live by them. It separates.
Yeah, and what I'm getting from that as well,
right?
What I'm getting from that as well is this differentiating, saying that he was not a part of this group or that group.
Mm-hmm.
He was Muslim and not. To say that he was Muslim there might sound like it is a religion type thing, but he's basically submitted to God. He's submitted and not made. And not been a polytheist or not made attributing to God. So he's submitted alone. With the Hanif, he's done it alone, singularly. Because if we go to the next verse as well, on 68, it's talking about how he helped them on their guidance to get them to Iman, to turn to Allah alone, because Allah is
it's the last bit. Wallahu waliyul mu'minin.
He is wali. Yes.
Yeah, wali.
He is the wali of the mu'minin. He is the one that you turn to. I think it's one of the other verses we did where it's talking about when we were asked to do salah and they tawallo. So they turned away. Where it's talking about wali that's like someone to turn to, like a guardian.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that is who Abraham is getting them to turn to Allah, God, not to the Christianity or the religion of Judaism or even this religion of Islam. It's about submitting to God alone and turning to God as your guardian alone.
Yeah, nice. That's a very nice summary.
Very nice.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, hopefully by virtue of us doing this study and having the opportunity to share our study as well, hopefully it also inspires others as well to to undertake their own study, which is what we've said today is really important. That people, if they haven't already started, actually start to study and think about how to study this from this book from the Lord.
Absolutely. I mean, to be quite frank, we're not doing this because we think we understand and we're just trying to teach other people. We're doing this for our own benefit just as much as for anybody who can benefit from it. This is for us to learn amongst our group from each other, as well as we're trying to help others learn as we learn. So, yeah, we're not claiming to be the be-all, end-all, know-it-all, where we think we can just hasten through it because we feel we've got its revelation. We too are taking our time and not hastening through it because we want that knowledge and revelation for ourselves as well. We're just glad to share that experience with other people. Yeah.
And that's something hopefully which also comes through, which I mean we very much enjoyed doing the study between the three of us. We look forward to it, don't we? I mean, we share messages throughout the week saying, "Hey, we can't wait to do the next one."
Yeah. And a lot of the time, we don't know what we're going to come out with. Like, even though I've done my homework and stuff like that, I think the angles that we've been able to come out with is kind of off the cuff, and it is more for our learning and sharing it. I think
sharing the experience.
It helps others learn by seeing us learn. I think don't learn to answer questions and don't learn to repeat what I've said. I think even how I learn best is being in a learning environment where others are learning. If I'm being told, I think my brain shuts off a bit and I don't take in as much. Whereas if I'm in an environment where I'm being shown and guided and taught and I can have input, I feel that it's much more helpful for my learning, where I'm encouraged to learn off my own back by seeing somebody do something in a certain way. I can pick up certain things and maybe even develop my own style and improve upon their style for my own way.
Or improve your own style or process.
Yeah, I mean,
very
just
dynamic.
And just to give an example, I mean, you mentioned that if you watch somebody else study and learn, you might pick up ways of learning yourself. And I'll give my own personal example of studying with your good selves. So over the last few weeks, one of the things which I've learned and I'm now applying myself is that, so Emma, I think you mentioned one of the earlier podcasts that I've always said in my study sessions that the last word is really important and it helps to summarize the context of the verse that you're studying. But actually what I've learned is that sometimes even within that verse, you'll have certain terms being used, which God is using to describe these synonyms or antonyms. And I've picked it up and thought, that's, I never thought of studying that way. I'm now applying that skill. And Mike, one of the things that you've done brilliantly in all of our study sessions is you've picked out a word and said, I don't think that quite makes sense. And I've just assumed that it makes sense, right? And he said, no, I don't think that makes sense. And that's taught me not to take any word for granted and really ponder over the words and see if that really is the best way to understand a particular word. And those are just real examples of where, based on what you were saying, Ahmed, where through this, I've had the opportunity of seeing how you think and how you study, both of you. And I've taken it into my own toolkit of how I study, which has been absolutely incredible.
I can truly attest I've done the same with both of you as well.
Yeah, I think with all of us, this is why this is so beneficial for us all, because I don't think any one of us is in a stature where we're like, oh yeah, I know, and I'm going to come here and convince these two people what I've already figured out. I'm not going to learn here. I'm going to teach. So I don't think any of us are coming with that approach. I think we're all coming here to look at something.
Yeah.
Exactly. Look at it properly and willing to take on each other's opinions and willing to share our own opinions despite our lack of expertise, so to speak. But I feel that, each of us have been studying this a while already. So it's not as if we're absolute novices.
Right. I'm coming with
got some time served.
10 or 12 years of reading this book over and over and over again, and not just reading it to read through it, but reading it, trying to understand it, trying to ponder it, seeking that guidance from God. And here I am, 10, 12 years later, still gaining absolute knowledge that's completely different than what I grasped after all that time of doing it. It's a beautiful thing, and it makes my heart swell, and it makes my head explode sometimes.
Much appreciated. And on that note, we've been going for 1 hour and 40 minutes on my clock. That's a fantastic session. And again, thank you both. And thanks to all those who are listening or watching this as well. So I suppose it remains to be said, until next time, inshallah.
Until next time. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Peace and
Thank you very much. Peace and blessings. Salam.
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن